Glad to be here. We are the authors of the book you see on the screen, Roots Revisited, a Hometown Study. We are from Strathroy, Ontario, though a couple of us are quite far from Strathroy now, yet all three of us who grew up there consider it our hometown. Um, we have two Daves here, and I'll go to David Marshall first. David lives in Australia now. But David, you were the first of the three of us to move to Strathroy. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, well, I was super young when I moved to Strathroy, so I don't remember it. And like anybody who's 1 year old, they don't really recall whether they made the move or anything. So that's why, in a lot of ways, Strathroy feels very much like my only hometown. Technically, I lived in Whitechurch near Wingham before, but yeah, that was about it. I always think of Strathroy as where I grew up completely. So, and what about you, Steve? What happened your way?
Well, I was not one. I was three when my family moved from Michigan. My father was working for an American company. He is American. He was offered a better job at a new factory in Strathroy. He would run the place, and he jumped at that opportunity. I'm sure he knew nothing about Strathroy at the time, but he checked it out, I think, and figured it would be a decent place in which to raise his two children, in which to make his home. And so when I was three in 1961, gulp, my family moved there, and Strathroy is the first place I remember as home. But uh, Dave, uh, Dave Riddell, I think your situation is a little different from ours. What brought you to Strathroy?
Yeah, my family moved from Winnipeg. Um, and I recall, I guess I was a little older than you guys when I got to Strathroy, but I recall that it was very painful for me to leave Winnipeg because I had made some, good friends there, kids on the block. And yeah, so we got to Strathroy and I went into grade three. I had a very catastrophic experience going into grade three. I think it was my first day there, and I couldn't negotiate where the class was. There was recess, and I couldn't find my way back. So I went home crying at the place that we were staying before we got our house. Actually, it was a friend of my mother's that put us up there, and yeah. So that was my entry to Strathroy. I guess was not
Okay,
very.
so you were, what, about 8 years old? No, you were older, weren't you?
Yes, I'm thinking 10,
Yeah.
somewhere around.
Okay, so not an auspicious start for you.
No, no, yeah.
And I think you made a really good point there, Dave. You brought up a little bit about where your parents came from, and mine, yeah, Northern Ireland. You know, even though they lived in Strathroy, in near Wingham for a year, they were lived in Canada, sorry, and coming to Strathroy was still new migration, new immigration sort of thing for them. As my dad set up being in the Presbyterian church, and my mom set up, yes, being a doctor in town and doing all sorts of things that way, particularly with children at a certain stage. When they were going through all those inoculation sort of things, they always needed a doctor present at that time. And Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about, what you did, bringing them there from America, but yeah, any other difference in ethnic background, national background?
Well, you could be referring to my mother. In fact, my parents met during World War II. My father was an American soldier stationed in the south of France, where my mother happened to live. My mother was living in Nice. She uh, met this American soldier and, decided she was going to marry him, or something happened. So my parents actually relocated to Michigan, a place called Owasso, which is about a 3-hour drive from Strathroy. and that's my birthplace. So my mother comes from quite a different background, and when she came to Strathroy, I think she brought a lot of France with her. In fact, she was a French teacher for a number of years, not in Strathroy, but in Watford, Ontario, about 20 kilometers down the highway. In my house, there was I think some reflection of French culture. My mother and I spoke French to some degree, though she didn't really drum it into me. But yeah, my parents came from very different backgrounds, but for some reason they seemed to thrive in their way in Strathroy. I think they really enjoyed living in the town. And my first memory in Strathroy is when I was three. I remember I was three because part of my memory is telling somebody I was three at that time. But yeah, I think they got off to a good start and did well in the town, and I think they did a good job of raising my brother and me there as well.
And that's a good point, Steve, about three, because that's when I start to, as a child, that's when I start remembering myself. So 3 years old, that birthday even is in my consciousness. And probably whoever watches us will have that little sensation of, yes, it was when I would turn three that I remember who I was and what I was doing. And Dave, that's why you have that different sort of background, because you were three elsewhere. So that's a big difference. Three until 10, you were still hanging out somewhere else. So big
Mhm.
differences. So we have this relationship to it very much where it became our hometown. And Steve, let's jump on to something else around this maybe next. Now that we've described all that, I think we maybe should get into maybe how did we leave? How did we leave, Steve? Why
Okay,
did we
yeah,
leave?
we'll get
And
into those intervening years at some point. But Dave Riddell mentioned, some difficulties in school when he was very young in Strathroy, at least adjusting to his new school. Well, I think I attribute a lot of my very strong desire and knowledge that I was going to leave Strathroy to some uncomfortable feelings with regard to school. I think I wanted to put some distance between myself and the setting of particularly my high school. I mean, um, I was not a huge fan of the school in Strathroy. I mean, I've taught over the years since then, and I've seen a lot of worse places for sure. But to me, the Strathroy High School was not a place that really nurtured students in a way that I might have liked. But in my case, definitely, I saw a change ahead when I finished high school in the mid 70s or whenever it was.
yeah, and it was a big effect for me too. I mean, university, I could tell, even though, yes, I went to Western, that it's called now, or UWO back then, is it was, yeah, it was essential. But I remember even that move to London uh, made me think, oh, yes, my future is going to be elsewhere. Am I going to get work in Strathroy? Maybe, maybe not. But Strathroy had a different feel to it about what was there. Yes, both my parents were working there, but I didn't necessarily see it that way. Having said that, whenever I was unemployed, yes, I ended up back in Strathroy hanging out there because I couldn't quite pay for wherever I had an apartment or something in my late teens, early 20s. And that was a big factor as I went forward in life too. So I always felt like I was going to go back there. And yeah, my brothers stayed more or less, not all of them, but close to Strathroy, two out of the three of them. And that had a factor too, that I had to always think about that. My parents, once they retired, they started thinking elsewhere and got on a big boat and headed down to the Bahamas and hung out on their boat for years and years. So that was a giant sort of change. Nonetheless, because my brother was a still a doctor, medical doctor in Strathroy. That was the hometown that we always went back to on Riverview Drive. All of us would always end up back there for big events. Dave, you got anything to add to your background history there?
So my folks who also met in the war came to Strathroy, yeah, for employment reasons. They were my mother especially, I guess, had something lined up in Strathroy in terms of the hospital, and she became a switchboard operator at the hospital. And also her friends were in Strathroy, her very close friends. My father, on the other hand, really had to scratch and scrape to try and make something out of his life because he was formerly he worked as a surveyor, geological surveyor in northern Manitoba, and into Winnipeg when he married and became a car salesman of all things. And he continued being a salesman in Strathroy. He actually started commuting to London quite early on, as I recall, to uh, to secure employment in London. So, which continues, which was prevalent back then, and of course it continues to a large extent today. And we'll probably say more about that as well as we go on. Yeah.
Yeah, and my dad, classic minister, and then 1968 became a school teacher. And as that developed, he did kind of almost, I would say, social work once for the kids who were struggling with the idea of even high school at that stage. Because the rule, as we know, is that you have to go to school until you're 16. Although we did discover that some didn't go that long in our own study of the hometown study. Um, and yeah, and he gradually became the full-on English teacher over time. But that, yeah, it was interesting because I could see that, the changes in our parents also had something too, as they left or stayed wherever they were, also made Strathroy interesting for us as a place to go back to, but also interesting that we always thought probably work. I'm thinking work and ideas and stuff. We thought we had to go elsewhere. But I think that's different in Strathroy now. But Steve, take over. Tell us what we should go to next as we
Yeah,
go on.
yeah, I think all three of us have wondered, if we had come into the world a few decades later, whether we would have been so set on leaving our hometown. I mean, we've adopted other places since then, obviously, sometimes, well, all of us in multiple cases. But, now, although uh, I do a lot of teaching, I do it from home. I do it from a computer, and Strathroy has many remote workers as well. Some just want to leave the cities. They don't have to show up at offices, at least not very often, so they move with their work to Strathroy. I wonder whether I would do that. I don't think I would do it full time, but I can see myself keeping a place in Strathroy, working out of there. It probably would be an interesting life as long as I had absolutely no connection to the high school I used to go to. And it's interesting. My parents, like David's, ended up leaving Strathroy. They settled in Florida first as snowbirds during the winters only, but after a number of years of that, um, they they lived entirely in Florida, enjoyed it, but they always spoke fondly of Strathroy, especially my mother, who was from France, as I said. My brother lives in Florida now as well. He speaks fondly of Strathroy, as do I at this point. When I was, say, 15 years old, I probably didn't as much, but I can say that from the time I left, I was very comfortable returning every time I did return, though I never stayed for a particularly long time. But um, I think I still consider it my hometown, and that's what came into my motivation for wanting to work with David and Dave on this book. But yeah, it's a different world now, and I'm planning to get back to Strathroy later this year. For those of you around Strathroy, um, we will be delivering a talk at the Strathroy Library on November 19th. Please check it out. I'm looking forward to getting back because Strathroy is still my hometown, and I'm, as I say, looking forward to getting back there very soon.
Yeah, and that's really good, Steve. And our subtitle of Hometown Study, you know, everybody has experienced that in their life, in their lives, on some level. Yes, lots of people had to move many times, but they probably still, in their brains, have something which is their hometown, no matter where they moved over time. And that's what we want to get into. Let's build up that. We could call it a discipline, but let's call it a sub-discipline, a hometown study. We'll call Roots as the main Roots Revisited, trying to get back and trying to understand how a hometown plays in our development, but also constructs the whole dimensions of what is significant and what is, something that we see that is less connected to us, but connected to other people in the last 50 years. It's been a massive, massive transformation that has occurred in Strathroy. And we know one thing, it's called Strathroy Caradoc now. Admittedly, yes, I went to Caradoc North School, the public school, so I kind of was in that part of the township. But that was an interesting transformation that we can explore further. And that's the beauty of our book is that we explored it. And we even went into that thing of what made us happy in Strathroy. One of the chapters was just trying to get into, we loved it because it was not too far from the Great Lakes, that we always had a great, great summer holiday or something that we'd head to the lakes as well. And yeah, Dave, do you have anything to add on to that? What you felt was really great as you went through?
We talk about what made us sad.
Good point. Sad. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, I've done that already. I guess I won't go on about that. Uh, school, yeah, it was, it was good and uplift. I mean, it was good and not so uplifting at times. Early grades were best, probably for me. High school didn't really care about or didn't really care for as Steve. Uh, we were pretty much in unison there about that. And yeah, I guess, do we talk about whether what made us leave, or is that a different episode? Or what did we?
Well,
We can do that another
I
time.
think we at least touched on that. I mean, for me, it was not just wanting to make distance between the school and me, but it's just I had interests that were hard to address in Strathroy, I would say. I mean, whether we talk about music, um, writing, there was a university in London, but I wanted to get out of the area. My first university was in Eastern Canada, which to me was a new place at that time. It just seemed normal to me to want to go, maybe after going for a while to reconsider going back possibly, but in my case, I pretty much just kept going. But there's that boomerang effect that seems to bring me back from time to time. Um, so it felt like time and the normal thing to do then because I did feel a little isolated in Strathroy and, wanted to get more into the thick of things.
Mhm.
Yeah, could I add something to that, Steve? I'll just go into it that very similar to Steve, I did go elsewhere, and in that elsewhere, we can get into that in another level. But in a weird way, one of the great things that happened in Strathroy that we will probably bring up again is, they built tennis courts just as we were getting into our teenage lifestyle ish moment. And that became really, really important. But probably that's the reason why I ended up in Australia, is I went there to go play professional tennis tournaments. Totally destroyed myself in the first match, but so that didn't advance anywhere. But that drew me because of what was one of my, fascinations with where I ended up in the rest of my life. Not to say I went there immediately. It took another, 10 years before I went back to Australia to live there. And now I've lived on and off, lived in the States for a little bit as well. For I think I'm up to 25 years I've lived in Australia now. So that's a fairly long time. And I think, yeah, we all have, yeah, interesting things that have drawn us. And our next generations are probably thinking differently as well as we're going forward. It's
Yeah.
great to see the book right there.
Uh,
Yep, go ahead, Dave.
yeah, I was just going to say my uh, attempts at leaving the town probably weren't as successful as either of you guys. Um, but due to a large part, that's realizing, which I didn't really realize fully. It seems strange at the time that I didn't realize it fully, but how much of a homebody I really am, and I crave to be home a lot. And so I even though I had this dichotomy going on where I strove to break away from the town, I always wanted to get back. And I guess the thing that really pulled me in the end was the land and doing archaeology, which really tied me to that area eventually. But initially, it was just getting back to the home environment because I just craved that, you know. And it's only, like I say, later in life that I realize how important that that is in my life to have that environment. So yeah.
And that's really good point, Dave, because it gets us into our cognition and consciousness. It's always going to be there, the hometown. And we're going to, I guess, Steve, we're going to discuss this further as we go along, but I'll let you take over. I think we've probably gone far enough today, have we?
I think at this point, yeah, I would just encourage people, please check out the book, Roots Revisited, A Hometown Study. Badger your library until it gets the book. We would
That's
appreciate
what I'm
that.
doing.
Yes, well, that's the thing to do. And also, if you're on Facebook, just type Roots Revisited into the search box, and that will lead you to a website that we keep and plan to update as is appropriate. Also, feel free to contact us if you have any thoughts on hometown studies or your hometown or Strathroy. Our email address is rootsrevisited2025@gmail.com.
I just, yes, and I just tried to put it on my Google. So you can find it really easily. Just type it in and it'll show up.
Yeah.
But yes, the Facebook one, you can go further.
And again, our email is rootsrevisited2025@gmail.com. Well, I think that's it for this time. It's been a pleasure to talk to all of you and keep watching, and we will be back with more soon. Thank you.